Do you ever feel like the B in BMW stands for boat?
Then yours might be due for a front-end refresh.
Welcome to BS Garage. I'm Steve, and today we're going to be changing some of the front suspension components on this 2000 BMW Z3. This car's had over 20 years of neglect, and it needs a little bit of work to make it feel like a sports car again. We want to be able to take this car out for autocross and a little bit of light track duty, so having something that's kind of rolling all over the place on worn out suspension components is not really going to work for us. So let's head on over to Brenda at the workbench to see what we're replacing today.
So Steve and I are pretty much an expert when it comes to front ends now, after that harrowing Civic experience. And here's all of the parts that we're going to be replacing today, starting with our inner and outer tie rods. These guys connect the steering... These guys connect the steering rack to the wheel and makes the steering knuckle turn. So they're very important, and these are the bit that gets adjusted for your alignment when we're talking about toe in and toe out. We've got our sway bar linkages. They do what they sound like they do. They link the sway bar up to the front of your car and keep things stiff. Basically what happens is through these and the sway bar, when you depress one side of the car, the spring action on the sway bar forces the other side down. It helps to keep it flat. If yours are worn out, obviously there's movement in these and the sway bar is not going to get to do its job. These are the lower control arm bushings. This is for the contact point where our lower control arm makes contact with the subframe on the car. Okay, so these are obviously important because playing these means that your lower control arm is jiggling around. That's no good. Okay. Now, I have a whole lower control arm here. Technically, we don't need a whole lower control arm. Technically, we just need to replace these ball joints, but I never ever again want to press in or press out a ball joint, and since these come as one complete piece, we're just doing the whole thing. So these guys at the end here, you'll notice they're very stiff and don't want to move on their own. That's what you want out of a ball joint. On the Z3, there's nothing to be gained by pressing the ball joints out of your existing control arm and pressing in new ones. The best practice seems to be just to replace the entire lower control arm in one go, and so that's exactly what we're going to be doing today.
Now, because we can move this by hand, and I can actually compress the spring just with a single hand like that, and I'm not that strong. And also, because we do see some oil on the piston right here, I think that these struts need to be replaced. But for today, we're not going to do that. We'll tackle that another time. And because we are professional YouTubers, we need to stretch this out into as many videos as possible. So if you want to follow along with those, be sure to like, subscribe, ring the bell, all of that stuff, and we'll do it in another video. So we're going to get to work, starting with the tie rods first.
We're down here by these tie rods, and we've got this bolt that has to come out. That holds the ball joint on the outer tie rod to the steering knuckle. So first thing we're gonna do is detach that. And then it should just come out, hopefully. Ooh, so easy. All right, before I forget, while this is still attached, there's this nut right here that helps to keep the tie rod from moving, and we want to break that loose first because after stuff's detached, it's all just gonna spin around everywhere and make it hard for me. I don't know what size nut this is. I have an adjustable crescent wrench. That's how we did it on the Civic. It should work again this way. Should. It did! Yeah, I'm an expert. Ooh, it's all grimy. But that's what we needed, because now we're going to be able to separate the outer tie rod from the inner tie rod. Success! did it! Squeeze. So, on a healthy tie rod, where's my healthy tie rod? Thanks, hand behind the camera. On a healthy tie rod, pushing this is very hard. That's what you want because that keeps your steering nice and stiff, yeah? On an unhealthy tie rod, such as this one, assuming it is an unhealthy tie rod, this has a lot of very easy play in it. Hint, behind the scenes, we've done this before. We already knew it was messed up. That's why we have to replace it. So this is a bad tie rod, okay? And it's gonna come out, and that should fix up a lot of the steering slop that we've got going on in here. I'm going to remove this boot, and hopefully we can take the whole inner and outer tie rod assembly out as one piece and not have to worry about disconnecting these things from each other. Don't break it. No, like I was trying to break it. There we go. That's one. Ow. I'm trying my best not to tear my boot because I don't have a replacement, so I'm being gentle with it. There's a little rubber puck that these BMW tie rods have, and your boot sits on the little rubber puck. So, behold. The Z3 tie rods, the inner tie rods have this rubber puck on them, and our replacement comes with a rubber puck as well. But the old ones have them, and that's what the bellows sit on. So you're just gonna work that gently off. We don't have a replacement bellows, so we're being careful with it to not damage it. So we just gently work that off, and if you pull it back, that easily makes this grabby part of the tie rod accessible to your tools. We have a special tool for removing inner tie rods, which we're going to use. And you don't have to disconnect the bellows from the steering rack. You can just leave it if you're not replacing your bellows. The whole reason, I mean, look at all of that easy floppy play in this tie rod. That's why this has to get replaced as well. This is toast. You take a little comparison to the inner tie. I can't with my hand. It's not possible. Well, I mean, I could keep working at it and maybe hurt myself, but this is what we're looking for, and that's why we're replacing it. So, if you have tie rods that behave like this, it's time for them to go. So if your car's 20 years old, odds are yours are just like this. They were just like this on the Civic. It's pretty common. Okay, now this comes out. So these, they constitute our inner tie rod removal kit that we rented, and it fits, or the little attachment here fits right over the end. We're using the 1 3/16 sized attachment, and the rubber disc on the inner tie rod kind of gets in the way, but I've got it kind of pushed away here. And then if I pull back the boot, I can fit our little attachment over the top, and then I should actually have enough clearance on this to break it loose. That's what we're going for.
So using your buddy, have someone kind of hold the tool down there. We're using a breaker bar, and then it comes loose pretty easy.
Yep. And once that is loosened, it'll actually come out by hand. So, fortunately that's not torqued way down. It was on the Civic, wasn't it? It was a lot harder on the Civic.
It was.
Aha! Old inner tie rod and outer tie rod attached, which we can actually use to compare to our new ones to get a sense for our alignment. Obviously, this needs to come a lot more in order to make the wheel alignment the same. I'm still going to take it to an alignment shop after this, but we can at least get it in the ballpark and save our tires a little bit. This one's almost sized correctly. Now that the tie rod is out of my way, I'm going to remove this here sway bar linkage, which looks like, where's my new one? Cool. All right. This is what a new one looks like. It's got a ball joint on one end and a bushing on the other end. And the ball joint end goes in like this. The bushing end has this bolt with a nut going through it. So we're just gonna detach that. That should be nice and easy, and maybe I won't even hurt myself doing it. Come in with the 13 on the other side. Swoop! Easy, so easy when you have power tools. Where the fuck did it go?
Okay.
There it goes. Okay. So now I have no tension on this bolt and it'll just come right out. Okay, so trolley jack is your friend for removing your sway bar linkages. So I just jacked it up enough to take the weight off of the sway bar. Position you're looking for on the sway bar is parallel to the ground. That takes the tension off of it. And once the tension's off of it, you can just pull the bolts right out. That's very easy. And then, boop, that was easy too. So, if this follows the same pattern as our tie rod ends, and it does, and I have not removed this before, again, a little bit of behind the scenes movie magic, I had no idea, but it was a pretty safe assumption given the state of our boots that these haven't been done maybe ever. And you don't want that. You want it to be nice and tight, just like everything else. Cool, so this one's out. This one's in. This one, same as all the other ones, very hard for me to move. Cool, so that's been taken out, which is one of the contact points for our lower control arm. We've got 2 more ball joints and a bushing in the subframe that have to come out next. We're gonna start with the most annoying one, which is this nut right here on that ball joint. It's the most annoying one because it's tucked in there and hard to get to.
In keeping with today's theme of being inappropriately loose, this also shouldn't really flop around like that. This is a good indication that the lower ball joints are shot, because they should also be pretty tight. And you would be able to move this with your hands, but it wouldn't really flop around like this. So getting in here, we have a lower ball joint here on the outside, and we're gonna take this bolt off first and then separate that. And then we have to work on the inner one and probably refer to the internet to see how you even get at that, because I don't really have a good idea right now. But we're gonna do the easy part of the hard job first.
Did you do it?
Yep.
Oh wow, that was really not tightened down at all, was it?
It's greasy. So it is tightened down.
Okay.
But it's very grindy. Now I would remove that nut all the way, but the little mounting point of the strut makes that impossible, so I'm gonna bring it out as far as I can, and now I'll try to separate that ball joint and drop it down, and then continue removing that nut. That's what I thought.
Here goes. Pop. Yeah.
Okay, is the whole thing rotating? The whole thing is rotating. So, I'm gonna have to try to get in there, I think with some pliers or vice grips. Since this ball joint here is so loose and it's just spinning with the nut, I'm gonna try to cut the boot off so I can kind of hold it in place. There we go.
Yay.
You know, next time we're buying your parents an S2000.
Yeah, I want the S2000.
Or a Mr. 2. Oh, yep. Alright. So we are loose. Well, we're not that loose. There. Okay, we can kind of get this out of the way. So now our lower control arm is just kind of dangling, and we're gonna move to the inboard body mount where that bushing is that we're gonna replace, and take that apart next, and then get to that final ball joint. So the lower control arm comes into this bushing, which we are going to replace because this one's kind of dry rotted. And the easiest way to remove that and the control arm is simply to undo these two bolts right here. So I'm going to use the big wrench for that because it is available and it's fun. Alright, so now this is all loose and dangly, and we have to figure out how we get to the nut at the top of this ball joint. I feel like that needs a little bit.
I think you did it.
Can't wait to do the other side.
Oh, it's gonna be so fun.
There. Fuck that nut. Ugh, terrible. Now that that's off, we can separate that lower ball joint and take the lower control arm off.
Let's see it happen.
Alright, we're gonna get back in there with the pickle fork and hammer on it until it falls out. It's all according to plan. So here we have our lower control arm. We had our floppy ball joint number 1, and still floppy ball joint number 2. And then we have our bushing, which I need to work on a little bit to remove, but we can kind of see how there's some dry rot in there and some cracks, and it's going to be nice to have one that doesn't have cracks and dry rot as the replacement. So we do need to reuse this bracket here, so we'll have to push that old one out, and then we'll get the new lower control arm assembled, and we'll just do everything in reverse.
We're struggling to get the bushing free from its mount here, and just to get this stuff away from the lower control arm, we're getting creative and using a drywall saw to saw at the rubber here. And actually, we're seeing some success, and eventually I'll be able to cut it free. It's just going to be tedious, you know, like a lot of this job has been.
Alright, Brenda hacks the middle out of this bushing, but now we need to actually drive the metal ring out of the bracket so that we can reuse the bracket and put the new bushing in. And in order to do that, we're going to throw it in the vise, like so, and then we're going to use the reciprocating saw to cut that out, and then we'll just totally remove it. It's fine that it's destroyed, and then we're going to have to try to hammer in the new one, and we'll show you what that looks like when we get to it. Okay, we'll take it and use the chisel to pop this out. So that piece comes out, and now we'll just beat the rest of it out, and then set to beating the next one in. And there's the old bushing. So we'll probably we'll want to take this and clean it up around the inside, just get any kind of rust or corrosion out. And then we'll slip the new one in. Okay, so we have our bushing set in there, and there is a direction. So this is the up arrow. You want to just place your bracket back in the car, make sure that everything's facing up. And use a block of wood to kind of apply even pressure and hope that it just kind of, you know, pounds in.
For folks watching at home, don't do what we did. We're doing this on hard mode. They actually sell replacement lower control arm mount bracket thingies with the bushings in them already, and that's definitely the way we should have gone with this. Alternatively, if you have an oxyacetylene torch, you can heat this ring up. That expands it, makes it easier to get things through. But dead blow hammer otherwise, and then you suffer like we do.
Well, after a lot of effort, we were able to at least get this bushing surface flush. That's about as far as we can get it with the crude tools that we have and without a real press. So we're going to put a little bit of soap on the inside and then slide it over, and then this will be ready to go back in, and then we'll start the reassembly. Alright, now we'll get that all lined up and try to tackle some of these bolts. Oh, this is terrible.
Just crescent for days.
Get that lined up. Go from there. Just like that. Cool. All right, 2 out of 3. Get this last one lined up. So we've got all 3 of the attachment points of the lower control arm started, and now we're going to go back and snug them up before we move on to the next part. Alright, so the sway bar end link is back on. We do have to do the bushing that didn't get shipped in time. So we're going to be back at it under there, undoing that in a week or 2 anyway. So we'll get on with the tie rod ends and then move on to the next side.
Get that threaded in. Wow! And we've got this over the top.
All right, here we are, ready for side number 2. Now, we actually have not cheated and looked ahead at any of this, so we don't know what kind of condition it's really going to be in, but we kind of expect it's going to be about the same. I don't think anyone was just like taking hard left-handers in the Z3 for 20 years and never turning right, so I think we're going to see a lot of the same problems, but we're going to try to go through it pretty quick using what we learned on the passenger side to speed through this. You can peel that back.
Yeah, shit. We just need enough to go. Swoop, and there it goes. I think.
Explosion!
Explosion! Hi, lady. Excuse me.
There we go.
Go.
Nice.
My game. Really enough to matter now, I don't think.
Awesome. Fuck. Now it's seated back onto the, there it is.
Yes!
Wow.
For the driver's side of the car, we had a much easier time getting this bushing in because in the middle of the day, went out and bought a vise. And even though we don't have a hydraulic press for pressing in, you know, bushings and stuff like that, we're able to use the vise to kind of shimmy it from side to side and then get this in a lot easier than wailing on it with a hammer. So kind of wish that we had discovered that technique a little bit earlier, but glad that we at least got it for part of the job. And now we are once again at the part where we're putting things back together.
So, safety only when we have to. The sway bar is now being supported by this trolley jack because it might be under tension and we don't want it like springing down after we detach the mounting bracket with its little bushing. So this is probably not necessary, but we don't trust it. Now, if you look closely, you can see that we have a ton of room to work on this bushing. So if you have a Z3, your bushings are really easy to replace, at least in the front. There's a big ass fucking mosquito right on the camera. Yes! That was so easy. This is easier than working on motorcycles, Steve.
This might actually be easier than working on motorcycles.
I think it is. Alright, I do believe it goes in like this, so I need to come in from the top. This one opens up easier, and it's very obviously been deformed. It's not springing back like the new one is. See? You got that, like, it's just got all of these impressions from where it's been just in shape for a really long time. So the new one, it's gonna be better. How much better? I venture a guess that we won't feel it. But that's just, you know, optimistic little me. There it is. Cool.
So I gotta say, this steering is very different from when we started.
Yeah, what makes it different this time?
Everything's coming through the wheel. I mean, people talk about BMW steering as kind of this end-all be-all, at least before they went electric.
Sure.
And now it's like everything grabs this wheel. It's like a go-kart or something.
Okay.
It's different for sure. You'll see when you drive it.
Okay.
Everything does feel a little bit tighter, more controlled.
Okay.
It's not as floaty as it was before to me. But I still feel some squirminess going on in the rear end, and I think that we do need new dampers and springs.
What about the front, like, as far as like body roll is concerned? Probably no difference there, right?
I mean, so it's just more controlled.
Okay.
It still rolls, definitely feel a difference here.
Okay.
I think that we did good work and we're moving in the right direction.
Right.
But I think we gotta go further. I think we need to take a look at the rear end.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to take a look at the struts or springs and shocks or coilovers all the way around.
Okay,
And yeah, kind of to keep it going so the front matches the rear.
That makes sense.
Okay, so thoughts? I mean, we just pulled over in a parking lot and swapped.
Oh, that's alarming. I just went over some train tracks and it's like the wheel sort of like wants to pull away from you almost. I also noticed in that left-hander, the wheel doesn't want to unwind itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is kind of weird. I wonder if that's just like things are tight right now and they'll loosen up, or
maybe we goofed on the alignment, though.
Put it in the comments. Does your BMW steering wheel unwind?
Yeah.
Maybe it's just a thing. We don't know.
We don't. We've never had one of these. Yeah, no, see? Okay, it unwinds to a certain point and then it doesn't want to unwind beyond that. It might be we didn't do the alignment right, but it does track straight, so I don't know. You feel every little imperfection on the road.
So would you say between control arm bushings, sway bar end links, and the tie rods are the most noticeable thing about what's going on here?
I think that might be the case. I don't think we're gonna really feel the ball joints on the lower control arms until we also do the shocks and struts, the springs and struts. Oh, it turns in so aggressively. Oh, this car is so twitchy. Oh, I'm almost scared to give it to my mom.
So now that we know how things can be tightened up in the Z3.
Yeah.
Because before it was kind of boat-like.
Yes.
The things, bob and sway, and I think that we can feel a little bit of play in the engine and transmission mounts also.
Yeah, you've mentioned a number of times that on shifting you can sometimes feel the transmission kind of rock before it engages.
Yeah, so seems like there's more rubber parts that could be gone through and
for sure
can really make this feel like new.
Yeah, definitely. I'm pretty satisfied with it.
I think it's the first step in a bunch of steps to make it a good track and autocross car.
Yeah.